As a fitness professional, you know the joy of helping others, and you know it's more than just fitness. We're training the whole person. Wellness coaching provides expertise that goes beyond fitness and nutrition. It's a holistic approach to helping others become their best selves while reaching their goals. To us, there's no greater joy than that. Join the fitness leader. Become a fitness leader. Become a certified wellness coach. Go to nasm.org/wellness.
You're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast with Derek Brown on the NASM Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Mindful Drinking Podcast, where we talk about tips and information that you can use to drink more mindfully. My name is Derek Brown, and I am a certified wellness coach with the National Academy of Sports Medicine, NASM, the podcast network you're listening to. And I'm the author of Mindful Mixology, a comprehensive guide to no and low alcohol cocktails. And I'm an award-winning bartender, which means that I've had an extensive social life, let's say. Bartenders spend a lot of time with people, a lot of time. And on top of that, I went out all the time and drank and would hang out with friends and colleagues and that sort of thing. In fact, I would joke that without alcohol, I wouldn't have friends, a hobby, or a job. So the funny thing about that is it's not a joke. It's true. That's exactly what I kind of immersed myself in, this world of drinking. And so even though alcohol may have been problematic in my life, the socials aspect of it was absolutely wonderful. I spent so much time with other people. In fact, sometimes it was a little overwhelming, but ultimately it was great. And I made so many amazing friends. When I changed my relationship with alcohol, that definitely brought up this huge question mark in my life. I didn't know what I was going to do. And honestly, I don't scare easily. But social situation without alcohol. I mean, almost everything I did involved first reaching for a drink. And so in that scenario, it was a bit scary. And so as I approached it, I realized that, what was scary at first became really something beneficial in the long run. I ended up having better conversations. I ended up feeling more connected to people. I chose a broader range of activities to do than just going to a bar or going to a restaurant. And so I felt a little healthier. So it actually, in the long run, was a net gain. But that moment was a little scary. And overall, I would say that I have gotten back to a place where I'm a little bit more social, not quite as social as I was during my bartending days, but definitely spending time with other people, which is a critical marker of health. I'm sure that many of you have heard that there is an epidemic of loneliness out there. And so social wellness, meaning having, great relationships, feeling connected, having meaning in those relationships, is really a critical aspect of health. In fact, loneliness as an epidemic is more dangerous in some ways. I think it was the Surgeon General who declared this epidemic, Civic, who also said that it's on a level of danger of smoking 14 cigarettes a day or more. So that's a scary fact. That's something that we really have to be careful of. And because of that, it's important that even if we change our relationship with drinking, that we continue to be social and engaged in meaningful relationships. Now, there is one person I know who has done a lot to promote this and to really go out there and create conditions under which people can connect without alcohol. And her name is Radha Agrawal. And so I want to introduce her and bring her to the show. She is a social entrepreneur. She is a co-founder of Thinks, co-founder of Daybreaks, an author. And there's way too many things to list on your resume on this show right now. But believe me when I say that Radha has done a lot to promote social wellness and social good. So welcome to the show, Radha.
Good to see you. It's Daybreaker, by the way.
Oh, what did I say? I thought I said Daybreaker, my friend.
Daybreak. You said Daybreak. It's fine. Yeah. It's all good.
Daybreaker. Okay. So Daybreaker, let's start right there. Daybreaker is a sunset dance party.
Sunrise. Yeah.
Sunrise. Yes. Okay. All right. I'm going too fast.
Let's take it back. We can take it back too. And
I'm too excited to have you on the show. So you founded this Sunrise party, and it's been a incredible success. Let's start there. Tell us a little bit about Daybreaker.
Yeah. So, I created Daybreaker 11 years ago, really before kind of the sober curious movement, because, as a early 30s woman, I was just sick of going out to nightclubs and sort of waking up with a hangover or going to bed at 4 a.m. I wanted to really focus on my wellness, focus on my own mindfulness, and be in bed by 10 p.m. And so the kind of the social experiment was, would people be willing to are people also curious about living a more sober kind of, sober life, but still not give up the joys of dance and the joys of getting dressed up and the magic of going out and dancing and having fun. So really Daybreaker was kind of this social experiment. Like, what if we replace the night with the morning, right?
Mm.
What if we actually changed the landscape of when people party from nighttime to the morning, when our energies are the most full, when everyone just came from the same place, which is their bed, rather than coming to a nightlife experience with all these different energy levels based on what happened to them during the day. So the night environment often feels very energetically confusing to me as someone who is very sensitive to energy in general. So the experiment was like, okay, what happens when you have clean energy, when everyone's coming from the same place, their bed? What happens when you remove the alcohol and the drugs? How people socialize, how do people engage with each other? How do people engage with themselves? How can we also train people to be less codependent between having fun and being messed up? I think so much of the world of socialization is kind of codependent between having fun and being messed up.
Yeah.
So can we break the codependence and help people actually relearn how to dance, how to have fun, how to be in connection with other people without the social lubrication of alcohol and drugs? And so
Amazing.
that was kind of the social experiment, and it worked.
That's incredible. Now, even though I know we do something called the Mindful Drinking Fest every year. And this last one, we had a non-alcoholic rave. It was in the evening, but I went to it and I danced and a lot of people were there. We had a great time. But even though I know that that's possible, in my mind, I still almost imagine like prom when I was a kid and everybody kind of standing on the side because they're afraid to socialize, because alcohol, obviously we use it in a way to elicit courage. Not necessarily the best use of it, but certainly something we do. So just tell me a little bit, like, what is it like to be in these dance parties, and how do people just get started?
Yeah. So, in 2013, I started it, again, as a social experiment. It was, kind of at the intersection, the beginnings of this big wellness boom. And it was kind of like this moment where these two worlds, kind of the wellness world and the festival world, were kind of all both blowing up. So, kind of the idea was, what if we brought them together, made a baby where you had the wellness, you have the yoga, the dancing in morning, and having healthy green juice instead of alcohol served at our events for free as part of your ticket. And really marry it with festival culture. So getting dressed up, and the thematics of all of our events are themed. So it's like we're on a peace tour right now. Everyone dresses in white and glitter. We're launching a purple tour this fall for the elections to bring red and blue together. And we're going to every swing state. We're doing a whole 60 event, a series this fall around getting out the vote and civic engagement. But the whole idea came from, this real curiosity for creating a dance floor that was really about dance. It wasn't escape yourself, but it was to return to yourself. And in the last decade, I did a lot of research on the science of our brains and the science of happiness. And our brains have these 4 happy neurochemicals. I coined this term called dose, which, if you can believe, spells out our 4 happy neurochemicals: your dopamine, your oxytocin, your serotonin, and your endorphins. So these 4 happy neurochemicals spells out the word dose. You can actually dose yourself on your own natural high if you actually reverse engineer the experience to give you each of those neurochemical releases. So at Daybreaker, we engineer the experiences so that you release your dopamine through listening to music, through getting up in the morning with the sun, with your alarm, that pleasure reward of getting things done. That's dopamine. The oxytocin you get from touch and hugs. And we have a hugging committee at the door that hugs you. And I can't tell you how many hundreds, thousands of people have messaged me thanking me for the hug that I gave them at the door, because they hadn't touched anybody in a while, and that hug meant so much to them. So imagine replacing a mean bouncer with a hugging committee to receive you on your way into a dance party. And then that's the oxytocin, which is like touch and connection. The S in dose is your serotonin, which you get from dancing with the sun. The sunlight releases serotonin. So the serotonin is released from your belly as well, the kind of that brain gut kind of connection that we have. So what we put in our bodies, how we connect with each other, how the MC gets us all connected, that's the serotonin release.
Yeah.
And the sunlight also gives us serotonin. And then the E, endorphins, you get from moving your body, that runner's high. The endorphin release you get from, that movement. You can burn up to, I've burned thousands of calories at Daybreaker. I've danced 8 to 10 miles at a dance party. So it's an incredible alternative for a fitness workout too. And you don't even realize you're doing it. So that reverse engineering of understanding the way the brain works, I think that's really what has kind of been such a wild kind of movement maker for this community. We started in New York as a social experiment, and now we're in 33 cities around the world, and 7 continents. We just did the Arctic Circle, top of the world. We've done Antarctica, Egypt, the Serengeti. And we have communities in all these places without even really trying. It kind of sort of exploded. We don't spend any money on marketing. It's all through what I call whisper sharing, word of mouth. People just love it. They feel so good. They feel so nourished afterwards that they tell 10 of their friends. And then that's sort of how the movement has grown around the world.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you for sharing all that. And I love this idea of the hug committee. That I find so fascinating. And it actually leads really well into the next kind of question or kind of segment I wanted to talk to you about. Because obviously loneliness is an epidemic, and that's part of what you've been addressing with Daybreaker. And I know that you have a new project we can talk about in a minute, but in reading about that and the Surgeon General's report, they literally say that a hug a day keeps the doctor away, right? I mean, hugs can help us not just feel good, but they help us with our immune response and so many different things. And in general, being social is something that's good for us, not just because it makes us feel good, although that it does, but also because it improves all our health markers, or almost all our health markers. So will you talk to us a little bit about how this addresses loneliness? Obviously, it's pretty obvious it does. And then maybe you can lead us a little bit into the new centers that you're creating with Belong.
Yeah. So obviously loneliness is our greatest pandemic. 1 in 4 Americans have 0 friends to confide in. And this number has tripled in the last 30 years. And it turns out having poor social connections is as harmful to your physical health as being an alcoholic, and twice as harmful as obesity. And so, when I learned of this, when I think about every social issue that we face as a human species, it ladders down to, I don't belong, therefore I will ... opioid epidemic. I will ... gun down a school. I will ... right? Think about every social issue, the environmental degradation, political polarization. It all is as a result of our loneliness that leads us to these dark, dark places. And so the idea is to not only end loneliness. Daybreaker the concept of it was not just to end loneliness, but it was also to do it in a way that's joyful, that's fun, that's magnetizing, rather than so much of what you read in the papers, which is like, we're in a loneliness pandemic and this is what's happening and this is what you can do, to support your sense of loneliness. I think, of course, step one is to admit that you're lonely. I think there's a lot of sort of shame around, especially with men 50 plus, to admit that they're lonely because of the machismo that they've been raised under. So that there's a loneliness epidemic, especially to first admit it. But then the way we address loneliness isn't fun. It's actually quite kind of sad and like, something's wrong with you and are you okay, rather than let's throw a party, let's make it fun, let's actually like kind of trick you into coming to this thing that you end up then making 3 friends. Like I've had, again, thousands of people write on their social media or share with us in an email how they found their roommate, their best friend, their love interest, their business partner, have walked themselves off the suicide ledge, have, no longer in depression, anxiety state because of Daybreaker. And so that's been an incredible byproduct. And just one quick thing to add to that, 80% of depression and anxiety cases comes from their loneliness. And so it's critical that we address the underlying issue around depression and anxiety, which obviously pharmaceutical companies don't want to talk about, because loneliness cannot be solved for with a pharmaceutical product, whereas depression and anxiety can be solved for with a pharmaceutical product. So if we look underneath these pharmaceutical products that support depression and anxiety, if we solve for loneliness, we actually take down all these issues, which obviously will reduce the revenue streams from all these big pharma companies. And so there's all these kind of diabolical reasons for wanting to keep us in this anxious and depressed state, for sad financial returns, which is actually what we're talking about here.
Yeah. You're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast, and I'm talking to Radha Agrawal about loneliness and various other things associated with it. And there is no doubt that these mental health conditions are incredibly complex, and loneliness, as you mentioned, is a huge contributor to that. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I know that you have sort of posited your own solution to this in terms of Belong Center. So I want to make sure that we get to that too.
Thank you. So we just launched this past year our new nonprofit Belong Center, where our mission is to end loneliness, not to reduce loneliness, but sort of to audaciously claim that our mission is to end loneliness and build a culture of belonging for people and the planet. And so we're building our team. We just raised a few $1 million for the nonprofit, and our goal is to launch in all 50 states in the next 6 months, and launch a Belong Circles program, kind of like imagine AA, but before you become an alcoholic, you actually get to go to Belong Circle. If you move to a new city, or you're feeling lonely, or you're moving from your new friends, you just got divorced, or you broke up with your boyfriend, there's so many moments where you're like feeling lonely. Instead of becoming an alcoholic and then going to AA afterwards to find your community, we're creating all these Belong Circles so that anybody who's feeling lonely can come to a Belong Circle, and then we'll either matchmake you with values aligned communities. We will teach you how to make friends. We'll teach you how to rupture and repair. We'll circle up there in your city so that you can actually make new friends inside of the Belong Circles. That's happening, ongoing. And we have 4 tentpole first projects for Belong Center. The first is the Belong Circle, as I just mentioned. The second is we're announcing very soon a big, we're calling it the 1,000 Block Party Challenge. I'm happy to share it with you here. But it's called the 1,000 Block Party Challenge, where we're going to resurrect the block party in America to get to know your neighbors. And so we're going to invite 1,000 community members across the country to raise their hand and throw a block party for their community. People don't know that it only costs $50 to $500 to get a permit to do a block party. And so we're going to make it very easy for them by creating a whole kind of block party in a box type experience. Again, all the projects that we're working on for Belong Center are all focused on making it fun, magnetizing, community oriented, not pathologizing our sense of loneliness. The third project we're working on is a project that we call Belong Benches. So we're basically putting these circular benches all across the nation in parks, children's playgrounds, schools, university campuses, airports. Instead of just sort of a linear bench, you just sit out by yourself, kind of alone together. We're creating these like circular yellow benches that you can sit around together. So if any listener wants to sponsor a bench with your name on it for your city or your school or your public space, obviously would love to invite you to sponsor a Belong Bench in your city as well. We already have 20 benches that we're launching across the nation. Which is a really cool program. And then the last project that we're doing is with UC Berkeley in the Greater Good Science Center, which is a 2-year study that we're doing to basically measure the science of collective dance, collective effervescence, collective awe, because currently doctors only prescribe more alone practices when you're feeling depressed and anxious. So meditation, walks in the park, yoga, which are all great, but also done alone. So we really want to have a solution that doctors can prescribe that's actually backed by science, backed by research, that says, hey, here's a very simple example. And actually, a lot of studies are just coming out now about how dance is actually the best way to get out of anxiety, depression, make new friends, connect with other people. And we really want to have a research study that backs that. And so we're doing that in partnership with UC Berkeley and Dr. Dacher Keltner, who's the founder of the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley.
That's fantastic. And I think they have such a great program. As somebody who's a student of positive psychology and appreciates that approach, I hear that littered throughout a lot of the things you're saying, but it's fantastic that you've created that connection with UC Berkeley. And I look forward to seeing those studies. That's going to be amazing. And I think in general, this kind of approach, the peer-to-peer circles and that sort of thing, I've seen that growing more in different ways, but especially in ways that is kind of, instead of, like you said, getting to the problem, like addressing it beforehand. And recognizing that there is preventative measures that we can take that helps to support our health and adds protective layers against everything from cardiovascular disease to the way we drink. So let's get into the drinking part of it, because I think that's obviously a big part of what I talk about and our listeners are here for. And I think that most people, it's been so normalized to drink in our culture that anytime they think about any of these activities, the first thing they think about is alcohol to some degree, or some kind of relationship to alcohol. So I wonder, what your experience with alcohol has been, how you feel that it fits into this puzzle, and in general, if you want to talk a little bit about your experience with drinking mindfully.
Yeah, I mean, I don't drink any alcohol actually anymore. I find that it actually gives me headaches and hangovers for 3 days straight. So I don't drink anymore. Not because I'm an alcoholic. I mean, not because I'm anti-drinking. It just doesn't align with my body anymore. But my relationship with drinking was, I was blackout drunk in college all the time. Doing the thing that, college kids do, blacking out, making out with just all these whatever humans that I just, from this blackout haze, and then really sort of escaping myself and then when I turned 30, when I was at the sports bar, I wrote a book called Belong. It's the beginning of my book as well. It's called Belong. And I share, in the book as well, that, when I turned 30 years old and I woke up on my 30th birthday, I realized that I was going to sports clubs and bars, drinking, to socialize. But then I realized, when I actually asked each person kind of one-on-one and quietly, like, do you like drinking. None of them actually liked drinking. They were just drinking because everybody else was.
Yeah.
And so we all kind of laughed. And I remember going home that night and I was like, wow, I'm just sort of sleepwalking through life here. And I am no longer interested in escaping myself in this way. So that was my journey to really building Daybreaker, which is a sober dance community, a sober dance party. I enjoy medicinal things. Like I'll do sort of ceremonial, medicinal, ayahuasca. I've done once. I'll do different type of ceremonies, like that, to really invoke my connection to spiritual realm, and spaces like that. But I do that, of course, very, very ceremonially, mindfully. It's not recreational whatsoever. And so that's sort of kind of the way I mindfully connect to other realms now. But I'm definitely no longer interested in alcohol. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I think that that's just such a sea change again in the way people think about things. So that's fantastic. Thank you for leading that. And thank you for sharing your story around that. And I think that you started to talk a little bit about maybe some more of the spiritual elements of it. And spirituality is definitely in general, not saying any specific, religious perspective,
Right.
but spirituality in general is a really great protective factor against alcohol use disorder and substance use disorder.
Right.
So that's a fantastic thing. And obviously we hear that in groups like, Alcoholics Anonymous, where it's part of the steps to accept a higher power and that sort of thing. But at the same time, church attendance is plummeting. And I don't want to get into necessarily what that is, but it seems like that the Belong Centers and your approach is in a way bringing a spiritual element, even if it's in the context of maybe something that is not necessarily religious. So I wondered if you would love to or like to address that.
Yeah. I think Daybreaker is sort of modern day kind of a culture center. So, whereas you went to church and you're sitting behind pews and reading a Bible, we want to create a place that, that you could, everyone knows your name. You go there and there's a dance floor. If you show up, there's going to be a community there with you. When you move your body for an hour and a half straight to music that sort of you let yourself move to, right? That moves you. All of a sudden you're touching these spiritual realms in ways that, as a Asian, Indian, Japanese sort of like very sciencey person, I wouldn't have trusted before, but I've experienced it myself. These moments where you find complete flow state and oneness just in the music and just lost in a crowd together, especially in a crowd that with clean energy, that's not filled with alcohol and substances and all the stuff, the cleanliness of that energy in the space and the safety that you feel being on this type of a dance floor allows you to move with so much sort of like non-self-consciousness that you get to actually travel to those spiritual places. And I actually feel like dance is one of the most ancient modalities to both heal yourself, but also touch these spiritual realms.
I love that. And I was recently I'm in Washington, D.C., and recently they had the Folk Festival, which is a really great festival that the Smithsonian Institute puts on. And they were focusing on Native American Indian practices. And I heard the term for the first time. It was actually in relationship to skateboarding, but it was originally in relationship to dancing, and it's called movement medicine. And so I think that's part of what you're talking about, but also how that connects to the spiritual end of it. There's, as you said, there's lots of religious practices that involve ecstatic dance, whether it's kirtans or you have one of my favorite theologians, a guy named Matthew Fox. He talks about creation spirituality, and he has these raves that are in cathedrals. I think he even had one in the National Cathedral a few years back, which is really cool. So I greatly appreciate all that. I think that's a really wonderful way.
Yeah, and for Belong Center, our belong circles. If you're not into dancing necessarily, come to the Belong Center, a nonprofit where we circle up and we do other somatic practices to get you in a space of belonging to your body, right? I think we're so divorced, mind and body, in this country, in our culture, in the world,
Right.
that I think that's actually where the loneliness begins. It's actually within our own body. So step one at Belong Center is like reconnecting your brain and your body, your mind and your body together, so that you belong to yourself and you actually recognize what is happening inside your body, so that you can then relate to the world more meaningfully. And so these 1 hour circles are meant to retrain your brain body connection, also learn things like rupture and repair. But also we talk about, I created something called the compass of belonging, which talks about these 4 directions to lead you to where you'll never feel lonely, will lead you to a state of belongingness at all times. And this compass of belonging is something I'm really excited about to share, far and wide. Yeah, I'm happy to share it with you now as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, let's get into that in just a second. You're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast. I'm here with Radha Agrawal, and we're about to get into the compass of belonging. She just mentioned that in the context of these circles and the Belong Center, and it sounds like we're going to get a sneak preview. So I'm very curious. I'd love to hear more about it. So please share.
Yeah. So I've been researching, belongingness for the last decade, and because we're all over the world, and because we touch so many cities, Daybreakers in 33 cities around the world, and we've worked with indigenous communities, we've worked with environmentalists, we've worked with all kinds of different communities to really understand how we belong to ourselves, to each other, to the spirit, to the planet. So as I've done all of this kind of research, what I really came to was, oh, wow, there's this compass. Like, if we all just had this map, this compass together that we could then turn to whenever we're feeling lost and alone, then this compass, this map would show us the way every time. So what would be that compass that anybody in the world, if they came to this map, they would feel a sense of belonging? So that was kind of this beginning of these directions. So there are 4 directions in the compass of belonging. There's the north, which identified as the spiritual realm, right? So we are so starved spiritually right now with the decline of religiosity year over year right across the country. But there is still a starvation for this sense of, wow, this is bigger than me. Life is bigger than me, because we feel lonely when the world stops at just ourselves. So the north in the compass of belonging is a connection to spirit. Spirit can be whatever you want it to mean. Connection to Gaia, to the earth, to the stars. It could be to a god of your choice, but some type of a spiritual practice that takes you to something that is bigger than yourself. And there's a part of your brain called the parietal lobe that gets activated when you get to trust fall into the spiritual realm, when you no longer have to be like all about you all the time. You get to just relax in this sort of idea that there's something bigger than you that's orchestrating all of this. So that relaxation allows your body to feel like you belong to something far greater than yourself. So there is this brain body feeling that you access from actually believing and connecting to a spiritual realm. So that's the northern direction.
Great.
Then there's the south, which is under your feet, which is your connection to the planet. We are all just made from elements of the planet, and yet we have completely divorced ourselves from our connection to the earth. We look at the earth through the lens of like our carbon footprint and how much we recycle and all this other stuff, but we don't actually have a energetic remembrance and connection to the earth. And when we actually stop, and when we're lonely and we realize, wow, I am just a node of the planet, all of a sudden other cultures, like in indigenous cultures of Africa and the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador, there isn't there's not a word for self. There isn't a word for each other. There is just the greater one consciousness, right? And so the earth, just connecting to the planet, connecting to the earth, is this beautiful reminder that we are not alone. We are never alone. We always have this beautiful connection to that which and where we came from. So that's the earth, which is the south. The west is our lineage, where we came from, what's behind us. And again, in America, or just in general, we're in this world of scrolling, what's happening now and tomorrow and the next moment, this kind of scrolling, never-ending scroll. We have no time to actually close our eyes and ask ourselves where we came from, where our parents, 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 parents. I mean, literally, if you actually look at the pyramid under you, it's 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents, 32, 64, in 10 generations, that's 2,064 people that it took to get to you in just 10 generations alone. 2,064 people it took to get to you. And yet we have no idea of where we came from, right? And so that forgetfulness, that makes us feel unmoored, makes us feel lonely. But as soon as we close our eyes and we're like, oh, wow, I am the miracle that arrived here, that gets to carry the mitochondrial torch for my ancestors, my lineage, all of a sudden you don't feel so alone. And you all of a sudden feel like you're carrying this opportunity, this excitement, this miracle to carry your lineage forward. And it's a beautiful feeling to come home to. And I just have been recently coming back home to my own lineage, and it's really, really exciting to come home to my Japanese and Indian heritage. My mother's from Japan, my father's from India, and to really come home to those lineages is super, super exciting. And then the last, which is the East, is our connection to service. When we feel lonely, right, and we have this map, as soon as we start serving another human being, another ecosystem, another being outside of ourselves, like we get so trapped in our own personal development cycles that we forget that the only reason we actually work on ourselves is to better serve the world, right? Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this. We are here to work on ourselves to better serve the world. And yet we get stuck just serving ourselves.
Right.
And that's the big problem here. So as soon as we feel lonely, start looking and seeing, where can I serve, right? Here's a wild stat for you. 90% of Americans don't even volunteer 1 hour every year. Right. 90% of Americans don't even give 1 hour of their time to service every year. And that's messed up to me. It's like in every other culture, certainly in Indian, Japanese culture, so much of our life is in service. And so as soon as this is why we feel so lonely in this country, because 90% of us don't even serve anyone but ourselves.
Right.
And so, anytime you feel lonely, you open up this compass of belonging, connect to spirit, connect to planet, connect to your ancestors, connect to your service, and you'll never feel alone.
I love that. I think that's such a great map to how we can, feel less lonely. And as you said before, as you can connect to these things that are not just about pathologizing loneliness, but also doing something great. Volunteerism is down. So that's even sadder that there's 90% of people who don't do it, and it's declining, right?
Yeah.
That's even worse. And the fact is that there is empirical evidence that volunteering improves your mood and makes you happier. So that's sad that, and I myself have probably reduced my volunteer. I still volunteer a lot, but after the pandemic, so I can see how a lot of people probably lost their mooring a little bit with that. But maybe this is a great reminder to everyone out there. Volunteer for something, anything.
Exactly. Mentor someone, take someone under your wing, like go and just just go and find, it doesn't have to be with a specific organization. It could be with someone in your community that is struggling, that you're reaching out, because we're just focused on ourselves. And the more me we are, the more lonely we are, right? So even if it's someone in your community, that a friend of yours that is struggling, bring them food, bring them, make them a playlist, send them a card, or handwrite a note. I mean, there's so many ways you can quote unquote volunteer in making the world a better place, just with these simple acts, right?
I don't know what generation you're from, but I can tell you that you just said something very Gen X, where you say, let's make a playlist. I imagined like taking a tape and handing it
Yeah,
to somebody like, here, check out this tape. That would be a really
yeah, totally. I'm on that Gen X millennial cusp, as they say.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I know mixtapes, that was my jam growing up. And it hasn't changed. Like whenever my girlfriend's giving birth, I make a beautiful birthing playlist for
Awesome.
my girlfriend. Or when I was pregnant with my daughter Soleil 5 years ago now, 6 years ago, I didn't know the first thing about motherhood, so I just set up a WhatsApp group, invited 10 women that I knew that were moms, but are also working moms like me. I was like, how the hell do you do this? And this community that I started was born. I called it Modern Mamas.
Hmm.
And now there's over 100 women all around the world on this WhatsApp thread, resource sharing, skill sharing, supporting each other, cheerleading each other. And it's been a lifeline for all these new mothers in my life and in my community. And so there's always something to do and create. And the biggest thing is to just start and not be afraid that no one is going to show up. I always say that even if just one person comes to your first event, amazing. You just started this podcast and you have 200 people coming. Like, I love that you're building a community. I want to support you for building this community from the ground up and just throwing your hat in the ring and saying, I want to do something to have my voice and to share my curiosities with everybody else. I have so much respect for you to doing that, for doing that.
Well, I really appreciate it, and especially from somebody who has created so many different communities and made so many different connections and is making a true difference in the world. I really appreciate what you do. And I want to mention one more thing before the podcast. And obviously, I think we all know, and especially as we, come up against the election cycle or in the election cycle, that enemy or this sort of political differences are really causing a lot of problems, and sort of the fact that people feel a little bit unmoored, a little bit lost. And it sounds like you had, and you kind of mentioned this earlier on, and I just put a bookmark. I wanted to ask more about it. You mentioned these purple parties. Was that what it's called? Or
Yeah, we're launching a tour this fall called the Purple Tour. And the kind of our tagline is party to the polls. Like we're actually bringing like pole dancers to the polling stations.
That's great.
We're offering breakfast sandwiches and a huge fanfare of a horn section and a DJ and just a full-on dance party to shift the chemistry around this sort of divisive election cycle. And also just the fact that civic engagement isn't well respected. Like people just stand in line in their headphones and it just feels like going to the DMV, the voting experience, right? And so, if we can actually make civic engagement fun and exciting and a place to see and be seen for the rest of time, if we can shift the culture around the voting experience. And my challenge to all the listeners on this podcast is, like, when you go to your polling station this fall, don't just go there with your earphones and bring something to share. Bring gold stars for everybody for coming to the polling station. Bring sweets, cookies to share. Bring a sound, like a little speaker to make it a party. Make the experience of going to the polling station communal, right? Bring something to high five each other for showing up to the polls, and really make it an opportunity to be a leader in your community and make the polling experience community driven and fun.
Wow, that's fantastic. And thank you for that. Thank you for all that you do. It's just wonderful. And we certainly need the energy that you're bringing to this. And is there how can people find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing 60 events at every swing state in the country, starting in September, October. Through October, they're going to be free events. Actually, I think $20.24, like 2024, to come. And the whole idea is to get out the vote, make it fun, meet people in your community. So if you go to daybreaker.com and then find your city, that's where we are, daybreaker.com. We have a full 60 event schedule that we're publishing in the next week or so. So find your city near you, and would love, as many people to share with their friends, to come out and get out the vote and really make it. I want it to be as big as a women's march, as big as Black Lives Matter, as big as this election is so important, that we really want to make it a fanfare.
Well, you've got me. I'll be there. And thank you so much, Radha. And thank you, listeners. I'm so grateful that you are showing up to listen to me, to listen to my guests, to listen to the NSAM podcast network and the Mindful Drinking podcast. We would love to hear more from you. So please do not hesitate to leave a comment, to reach out to us. We always, as much as I maybe it's too obsessive, I always look at the comments. I always read all of the mail that's sent my way, and I try to respond as much as possible. But I just want to say thank you so much. And as always, here's to drinking mindfully.